Hi, I am Noor Ayn from Medicine and Society Laboratory 10. So we choose to discuss about prevalence of LGBT among PPUKM undergraduate medical students. So LGBT is illegal in Malaysia, and Malaysian law currently provides for whipping and up to a 20-year prison sentence for homosexual acts involving either woman or man. However, over the recent years, Malaysia has seen an increase in LGBT incidents. Understanding the size of LGBT population is a critical first step to informing a host of public policies and research topics. Malaysia is actually a country that have concentrated HIV epidemic with infection rate remain high above 5% among key population. For example, among people who inject drugs, female sex worker, transgender, and men who has sex with men population. Malaysia HIV/AIDS cases have been reported since 1986 by the Ministry of Health. LGBT is increasingly contributing to HIV/AIDS cases. The trend of infection by sex has changed with increasingly female acquiring infection due to mode of transmission predominantly from intravenous drug user to sex transmission. HIV-infected female may pass the HIV genes to their newborn through maternal and child transmission. Female group is also prone to HIV, HPV, cervical cancer, and other blood-borne disease through homosexual transmission. So as you can see from the graph, the prevalence of HIV among females is also increasing together with HIV prevalence among males. This is because the male which is a drug abuser will having sex with their partner, for example their girlfriend or their wife, and they might transmit the HIV disease they get to their partner. So that is why there is actually increase in the HIV prevalence among female. While many researchers have been directed at the attitude of physicians toward LGBT patients, relatively little attention has been paid to the LGBT doctors and medical students. The factor most likely to affect the well-being of LGBT doctors and medical students are discomfort and homophobia, the challenges of medical school and residency, and lack of support system, experience verbal harassment and abuse their medical colleague, and discrimination in employment or education. Many does not look the matter any further to try and get it resolved for fear of future discrimination or harassment from the authorities. Therefore, this research aims to investigate the prevalence of LGBT among medical students. Many does not look the matter of LGBT among medical students or even try to resolving it for the fear of their future discrimination or harassment from the authorities, face discrimination and endangering their careers. Therefore, this research aims to investigate the prevalence of LGBT among medical students. So our objective is actually to evaluate the prevalence of LGBT among PPUKM medical students, and also to understand the awareness of LGBT among PPUKM medical students. So the hypothesis is actually the prevalence of LGBT among PPUKM medical students is quite low, and the awareness of LGBT among PPUKM medical students is also low. So, a literature review: how serious is LGBT in Malaysia? Based on the study 2013 Pew Research Center, it showed that actually only 9% of the Malaysian population believe homosexuality should be accepted by the society, while 86% believe it should not. So actually Malaysia is one of the Asian countries that has least acceptance toward LGBT. People who are over 50 years old were more accepting than younger people. So as you can see, above 50% believe that LGBT should be accepted in Malaysia, but there is only 7% of people between 18 and 19 accept LGBT. to development of LGBT. Psychologically, individuals that are confident with their identity in the LGBT community have greater well-being despite the prejudice and discrimination held toward them. However, lesbian and bisexual women has seen to show increased psychologically distress in terms of gender due to various stress. As compared to the past, the community nowadays are more openly exposed to alternative gender and sexual roles through the internet, especially social medias. Nevertheless, there is a downside to it. They are more prone to cyberbullying, which can cause many effects such as low self-esteem, depression, and even suicide in the worst cases. Based on an article published by Stanford University School of Medicine, it is said that loneliness, internalized homophobia, and compulsion internet usage prompt to incline the community toward LGBT-based behaviors. The study suggests that loneliness in childhood may be related to unprotected sex among young adult gay and bisexual males. Loneliness in adulthood also has been associated with high increased sexual behaviors among men that is having sex with men. Internalized homophobia has been associated with psychological distress among gay and bisexual men, as well as high rates of sexual risk behavior among young men who is having sex with men. Wide internet access today also resulted in an increase of social networking that helps in building connection and increasing the access to more sexual partners with mobile dating, for example, Tinder and.
Now, we are going to talk about the LGBT among medical students. Based on the data that has been collected from our survey, there is evidence of LGBT among UK medical students. Based on the study done by members of the Stanford LGBT Medical Education Research Group, there is evidence of LGBT among medical students, but they keep their sexual or gender identity hidden. This is because they are afraid of discrimination in medical school and how it could affect the rest of their careers. There are many effects of LGBT. One of the common effects would be depression and suicide. It's very common to see depression and suicide among the LGBT community. The next one would be there's a high prevalence of sexually transmitted disease. And one of the most common sexually transmitted disease is HIV. There's an increased risk of HIV transmission due to the HIV entrance at points of mucosal trauma, such as oral and anal during the sexual activity. The next aspect that we'll be focusing on is lesbian female health. There's a high incidence of cervical cancer, breast and endometrial cancer among the lesbian female. As for the breast and endometrial cancer, risk factors such as less likely to use oral contraceptives and smoking cigarettes is a major risk factor for breast and endometrial cancer, which is a common habit among the lesbian female. The next one would be gay male health. Eating disorders is shown and found in a study that clinical eating disorders could be diagnosed in 17% of gay men. And anal cancer is also another common disease among the gay male health. As for the transgender health, it is shown there's a high risk of thromboembolism and liver abnormalities with estrogen use and high risk of pituitary prolactinoma among the transgender. And the usage of androgen therapy is shown to increase the risk for heart disease, endometrial hyperplasia, and endometrial carcinoma. Besides that, gender reassignment surgery may cause sexual dysfunction. Methodology. The study design that we use is cross-sectional. It is a type of observational study that analyzes data from a population or a representative subset at a specific point in time. Cross-sectional studies are descriptive studies. They can be used to describe not only the odds ratio but also absolute risk and relative risk from prevalences. The duration of our study is 1 week, and the sampling population that we chose was year 2 2018-2019 UK medical student. The sample size was 162 people and the sampling technique was via questionnaire via Google Form. The limitations that we had was personal information of the respondents such as names, emails, races, and religions are not collected. This is because we want to highlight that our respect to the confidentiality of answering sensitive questions from our survey and not link individuals to their respective answers. As for operative definition, LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender, and along with heterosexual, they describe people's sexual orientation or gender identity. Lesbian is a woman who is romantically, sexually and/or emotionally attracted to women. Gay is a man who is romantically, sexually and/or emotionally attracted to men. Bisexual is someone who is romantically, sexually and/or emotionally attracted to people of both sexes. Transgender is people who has an internal feeling of being male, female or transgender regardless of their biological sex or known as the birth sex. They live or wish to live full-time as members of the opposite gender rather than gender assigned at birth. As for awareness, good awareness is when participants rated neutral to strongly aware for questions such as greater awareness, knowledge plus perception on LGBT in Malaysia. As for the channel of exposure, there are art, books, schools, social media, internet, movies, which later collapsed to two groups, where the internet included the social media, internet and movies, and others included the books, arts and schools.
Okay, let's move on to the next part, which is the result. We have interpreted the result by using descriptive analysis. For general overview, we have 162 respondents. 65.4% of them are female, which are represented by the blue color from the pie chart, and 34.6% of them are male, which are represented by the green color in the pie chart. 91.4% of them declare that they are heterosexual, 4.9% of them declare that they are bisexual, and 3.7% of them declare that they are homosexual. We have divided our questionnaire according to their sexual orientation. So in this presentation, there will be two groups of results, which is the first one, the LGBT group, and the second one, the heterosexual group. 57.1% of those people was having the first time same-sex attraction during teenage, 35.7% during childhood, and 7.1% during adulthood. From now on, any irrelevant data which are presented by the blue color in the pie chart are actually the answer from heterosexual group, which we doesn't include in the LGBT data. Among of them, 28.6% had come out from the closet, while the rest, over 71.4% people, doesn't openly declare their sexual orientation. The next part is social support. Social support means support from family and friends, and from the result, social support is not the major influence factor of them to openly declare their sexual orientation, as only 32.7% of them having social support. Meanwhile, the other 21.4% of the LGBT people do not receive support from family and friends, and the rest 42.9% are unsure whether they receive social support or not. 71.4% of them also admitted that their sexual orientation was due to internal influence, which was self-initiated, while we found that the other LGBT people are influenced by family members or relatives, friends, rape case, and 7.1% of them are unsure of what influenced them to become LGBT. Okay, next we move to the heterosexual part, which we have asked a different set of questions compared to the one that we gave to the LGBT group. 56.8% of those who are heterosexual do accept LGBT, except in a way that they are willing to accept LGBT people as their friends, but this doesn't mean that they actually support the ideology of LGBT. 36% of them doesn't accept LGBT, and 7% of them are unsure of acceptance of LGBT. Only 8.1% of people from heterosexual group had the experience of attracted to same sex, and the other 91.9% of them never had experience of attracted to same sex. 78.4% of heterosexual people are not supporting LGBT ideology, and 21.6% of them do support LGBT ideology.
So now we move on to which we further analyze the result using Pearson chi-square. Using this analysis, we compare the opinion between the heterosexual group and also the LGBT group. Firstly, we will compare the two groups using exposure channel of LGBT. Most of the heterosexual group, with 49.3%, have exposure to LGBT through social media, while most of the LGBT group, with 57.1%, is exposed to LGBT through the internet. Moving on to the opinion on LGBT legalization, it is found that both groups have the highest percentage in disagreement with LGBT legalization in Malaysia, with 73% for heterosexual group and 57.1% for LGBT group. Next is the comparison of the rate of Malaysian degree of awareness between the two groups. 57.1% of LGBT group and 52% of heterosexual group rate that Malaysian is aware of LGBT. So these tables show the support of LGBT according to gender. So 23.5% support the idea of LGBT and 63.2% of them are female. Based on the chi-square test, the p-value is 0.736. Since the p-value is more than 0.05, hence null hypothesis is not rejected. The conclusion is there is no significant association between gender and support on LGBT. This table shows that the attraction to same sex according to gender. So based on this table, 16% ones have same sex attraction and 53.8% of them are male. So based on the chi-square test, the p-value is 0.024. Since the p-value is less than 0.05, hence null hypothesis is rejected. Conclusion, there is significant association between gender and same-sex attraction. This table shows the opinion of legalizing LGBT based on the gender. 16.7% agree on legalization of LGBT in Malaysia and 66.6% are female. Based on the chi-square test, the p-value is 0.969. Since the p-value is more than 0.05, hence null hypothesis is not rejected. So the conclusion is there is no significant association between gender and opinion of legalization of LGBT.
This table is about non-internet and internet-based exposure to LGBT according to sexual orientation. 95.1% know LGBT through internet-based exposure, and 91.6% of them are heterosexual. The p-value is 0.523. Since p-value is more than 0.05, hence null hypothesis is not rejected. Conclusion, there is no significant association between sexual orientation and type of exposure to LGBT.
We move on to the degree of awareness of the sexual orientation. 52.5% rate that Malaysian has strong awareness of LGBT, and 90.6% of them are heterosexual. So based on the chi-square test, the p-value is 0.714. Since the p-value is more than 0.05, hence null hypothesis is not rejected. So the conclusion, there is no significant association between sexual orientation and rate of degree of awareness of Malaysian on LGBT. Now is the table of legalizing LGBT. 16.7 agree.
This table shows legalization of LGBT according to sexuality. 16.7% agree on legalization of LGBT and 81.5% of them are heterosexual. Since P is equal to 0.060, there is significant association between sexual orientation opinion on legalization of LGBT.
This table shows support LGBT according to sexuality. 23.5% agree on legalization of LGBT. 84.2% of them are heterosexual. Since P is equal to 0.097, there is no significant association between sexual orientation and support of LGBT. This table is about same-sex attraction according to sexuality. 16% once had same-sex attraction, and 46.2% of them are heterosexual. The p-value is equal to 0.000. Since p-value is less than 0.05, hence null hypothesis is rejected. Conclusion: there is significant association between sexual orientation and same-sex attraction. This table shows acceptance of LGBT according to sexual orientation. 64.8% accept ideology of LGBT and 89.5% of them are heterosexual. The p-value is equal to 0.382. Since p-value is less than 0.05, hence null hypothesis is rejected. Conclusion: there is significant association between sexual orientation and acceptance on LGBT.
After we have analyzed all the data, it is now the time to discuss our result. In our result, male have higher prevalence in LGBT. However, it is different in Norway, according to research that was done by Wickstrom et al. In 2003. Based on the result obtained, a strong disagreement on LGBT legalization among the Malaysian medical students was observed. According to Angers C. and Lucas R. in 2017, majority of the Indonesians disagreed that the LGBT community should enjoy the same rights as straight people. By comparing both the studies, Malaysia and Indonesia are Islamic countries, and both the countries showed that the citizens very much disagree on legalizing the LGBT rights. Hence, there could be a strong correlation between religion opinions and LGBT legalization awareness. Based on our result, large proportion of LGBT people do not openly declare their sexual orientation. Similarly, according to Munch et al. In 2015, which is a study conducted among medical students in US and Canada, there is also a large proportion of people do not declare their identity as LGBT. The most significant factors preventing identity disclosure were the perception that sexual or gender identity is nobody's business, lack of supportive environment, having fears concerning discrimination in medical school by peers and faculty, residency and future career options. These factors may apply to our local settings too, as both of these research strongly shows a similarity. Therefore, since many people do not openly declare their identity, there is a huge possibility that there are actually more LGBT in our society than what we think and what we see from our own findings. So, in the conclusion, it is seen that male undergraduate medical students have a higher prevalence of LGBT in the National University of Malaysia, UKM. Based on the results of this study, 8.6% of undergraduate medical students from UKM are classified as LGBT, and only 28.6% of them have openly declared their identity. This study also observed a strong disagreement on LGBT legalization among the medical students of UKM. Although the wide scope of LGBT and their rights are currently not recognized or legalized in Malaysia, modernization will slowly but surely bring awareness and exposure to all walks of life on the issues pertaining to LGBT. So here are the list of references that we use in our research. So thank you for listening.